You are using a technology right now that almost never existed. The cable you charge your phone with, the one you plug into your laptop without thinking, that little rectangle of metal and plastic, it came within inches of dying before it ever launched. 17 companies, 4 years, millions of dollars, constant arguments, and a single engineer who got tired of watching his wife struggle to plug in a printer. This is the story of USB, and it's not what you think. Before 1996, adding any new device to your computer was an act of war. Your printer used a 25-pin parallel port, your mouse used a 9-pin serial port, your keyboard had a round DIN connector, each one a different size, a different shape, a different language. And even if you had the right cable, you weren't done. You had to dig into your computer's settings and manually assign it an IRQ, an interrupt request line. Mess it up, and your printer would crash your sound card, your scanner would freeze your mouse. Tech people called it IRQ hell, and it was exactly that. By 1994, the personal computer industry had a crisis it didn't want to admit. PC sales were growing, but customer satisfaction was collapsing. Return rates were high, support calls were exploding, people were buying computers and giving up on them. In Microsoft and Intel, the complaints were piling up. Intel was building faster and faster processors, but if nobody could figure out how to plug in a keyboard, what was the point? The bottleneck wasn't computing power, it was the ports. And then there were the companies themselves. Microsoft controlled Windows, but couldn't fix hardware they didn't make. Compaq, IBM, and DEC made the computers, but couldn't agree on a standard with each other. Logitech made the mice, Epson made the printers, Nortel built the networking. Everyone was waiting for someone else to solve it, because whoever solved it first would own it. And while they argued, regular people suffered. Think about what was actually at stake here. The internet was just starting. Personal computers were supposed to change the world, but plugging in a printer required a computer science degree. The revolution was going to stall. Someone had to go first. Someone had to take the financial risk of building something everyone else might reject. That someone was a quiet engineer from India named Ajay Bhatt. Ajay Bhatt grew up in India, studied electrical engineering, and eventually landed at Intel in the early 1990s. His wife kept asking him one question: why is adding a new device to our computer so hard? He was an Intel engineer. He should have had an answer. He didn't. So in 1994, Bhatt wrote a proposal. He called it USB, Universal Serial Bus. One connector, one standard. Hot swappable, meaning you could plug things in while the computer was running. The computer would recognize the device automatically. No IRQ settings, no restart, no manual configuration. It just worked. Now he had to sell it to 17 companies who all hated each other. The original group was 7: Intel, Microsoft, Compaq, IBM, DEC, NEC, and Nortel. Over 4 years, it grew to 17 as more companies wanted a seat at the table. The fights were legendary. Fight 1, speed. How fast should data transfer? Faster meant expensive, cheap meant useless. They landed on 12 megabits per second, enough for mice, keyboards, printers. Barely. Fight 2, the connector shape. Circular, rectangular, reversible. Each company had engineers who'd spent years designing connectors and weren't letting go. Fight 3, and this one almost killed everything. Who pays for it? Classic tech industry chicken and egg scenario. PC makers wouldn't add USB ports until USB devices existed. Device makers wouldn't make USB products until PCs had USB ports. The stalemate went on for months, until Intel did something shocking. They paid for it themselves. Intel subsidized the controller chips and released the entire USB specification for free. No licensing fees, no royalties. Anyone could use it. January 15, 1996. USB 1.0 specification released. 4 years of arguments compressed into a 650-page document. And then, nothing happened. Here's what every USB article skips over. USB 1.0 launched in 1996, and it was a disaster. The ports existed on some Compaq computers, but USB devices barely existed, and the ones that did, they barely worked. Early USB ports didn't supply enough power. Devices would connect for a second, then go dead. Microsoft's Windows 95 had USB support so broken that Microsoft quietly pulled it. By 1997, tech journalists were writing USB's obituary. And then, Steve Jobs came back to Apple. Jobs had been out of Apple for 12 years. He returned in 1997 to a company hemorrhaging money. His first move wasn't software. It wasn't a new product line. It was a computer. One computer, translucent blue, shaped like an egg. The 1998 iMac G3, and it had exactly 2 connection ports. No serial port, no parallel port, no SCSI, no legacy anything, just 2 USB ports. The tech press lost their minds. Apple is abandoning its users, they said. Nobody has USB devices, they said. Within 6 months of the iMac launch, USB peripheral sales increased by 400%. Every printer manufacturer, every mouse maker, every keyboard company rushed to make USB versions because 2 million iMac owners needed accessories, and their iMacs only had USB. Steve Jobs, the man who wasn't even in the original USB consortium, single-handedly saved USB. But here's the real twist. The thing USB was designed to solve, cable chaos, eventually USB created its own version of. USB-A, USB-B, mini USB, micro USB, micro USB 3.0, USB-C, USB 4. The standard meant to end connector confusion spawned 7 different connector types. It took the European Union passing a literal law in 2022 to finally force everyone onto USB-C, and Apple, who helped kill the old ports with the iMac in 1998, resisted the new standard with their Lightning connector for 11 years. The iPhone 15 in 2023 was the first iPhone with USB-C. History. It rhymes. Here's what nobody tells you about how the world actually changes. It's not usually one genius, one garage, one eureka moment. It's usually a committee, arguing in a conference room for 4 years. USB exists because 17 companies who hated each other agreed that the problem was bigger than their egos. Ajay Bhatt never became a billionaire from USB. Intel owns it. He was an employee. He got stock options, a salary, and in 2009, a commercial where Intel made him look like a celebrity. The man whose idea touched 10 billion devices is someone most people have never heard of. And Intel, their decision to give the USB spec away for free, that might be one of the greatest business decisions in tech history. They didn't make money from USB directly, but USB made computers more useful. More computers sold means more processors sold. Intel made their money upstream. Giving away the standard didn't cost them the market, it created the market. Today, there are more than 10 billion USB devices in use. The spec went from 12 megabits per second to 1996 to 80 gigabits per second with USB 4 in 2022. That's not an upgrade. That's a completely different universe built on the same idea. The next time you plug something in and it just works, remember the 4 years of meetings, the 17 companies, the engineer who got tired of his wife's tech problems. Remember that the most seamless technology usually has the most chaotic origin story, because nothing that looks simple ever was. If you want more stories like this, the hidden histories of things you use every day, subscribe. Next week, the QWERTY keyboard was designed to slow you down, and it worked. See you then.